from the Energy Boutique with your energy and ascension forecast for Sunday, November 16th to Saturday, November 22nd. So last week was quite a banger. I don't know about y'all, but I almost kind of shook right out of my own skin. My central nervous system was definitely jacked with all of the astro shifts and of course all of the geometric energies coming into the cosmos. Whether it was real, whether it was fake, it was something. And I think we all definitely felt it. So let's review. Last week we had Mercury retrograde into Sagittarius energy, and that took place on the 9th. Typical Mercury retrograde, our thinking kind of went right to crap. Our ability to communicate effectively went to crap as well. And we had a lot to review, and it felt very pressurized. It felt like we were just kind of rapidly processing situations and circumstances that we weren't even consciously aware of. And that particular energy definitely carried us into the 11th, which of course was a heavy day of remembrance anyways. And Jupiter added to that intensity with his retrograde. And of course, he's retrograding in Cancer energy. So with Mercury retrograde and Jupiter retrograde, there is a rewiring of our systems going on. There's a recalibration of our mental and emotional energies going on. And there's a reformatting and a restructuring of how we remember the past. And it is a little bit challenging, luckily for us, with Mercury in that Sagittarius energy. We're plucking out the silver linings. We're trying to stay as optimistic as positive as we possibly can about some of the very intense realizations that we are definitely receiving. And Jupiter, of course, he turns the volume all the way up on what we're thinking, what we're feeling. We're feeling that intensity. And under the umbrella of Scorpio season, things are definitely so intense that, again, it kind of feels like we might hulk out of our skin. But the energy didn't stop there. We had the last quarter moon pop off in Leo energy on the 12th. And what was even more important about that particular day is that's when Mercury, freshly retrograde, bumped into Mars. And that is the second of three different activations that those two will be making. But that's where the restless energy came from. That's where the manicness came from. That's where the heart being cracked open came from. That's where the intensity really got jacked up. And we continued to feel that throughout the week. It's kind of starting to slow down, calm down right now, but we're not going to be gifted with too much time to actually settle in that calmness, because this week coming at us is a pretty huge week. We are going to be wrapping up the final days of Scorpio season, and under that particular intensity, which is essentially the phoenix being prepared to be resurrected and rise again, this is essentially the final days of the butterfly needing to crack its cocoon wide open and reemerge itself out into the world once again, and that is no easy feat. But here this week, we are going to have Mr. Mercury retrograde back into Scorpio energy, and he's going to be sitting at that 29th critical crisis karmic degree. And that's going to give us a little bit of a memory of an echo to a couple of weeks ago when Mercury was direct sitting at that 29th critical crisis karmic degree, which just happened to be under the new moon in Libra, that we are essentially closing out here this week. Why, you may ask? Well, because the real event taking place here this week is the new moon in Scorpio popping off at 28 degrees, and this will be taking place on the 20th. Now, here's the thing. This is going to be the second of 6 new moons that will be taking place at 28 degrees. That is a mastery degree. That's a perfection degree. That is very serious. Okay. There's a lot of karmic checkpoints taking place at those final degrees. Even more than that, the new moon is the dark phase in the moon. The dark phase is where we're kind of sitting in the darkness. There's no light or illumination in the sky. We're not seeing things clearly. We're in Scorpio season, so shadow work is definitely taking over. And that new moon, although it is going to be hella intense, and again, I am kind of, I'm not trying to sugarcoat things here. It is going to be profoundly intense. I would even go as far to say that this is going to be the most pivotal new moon that we have had all freaking year. Reason being, first of all, there is a profound intensity that comes with Scorpio energy anyways. It's taking place at 28 degrees, which is a very important degree to kind of get our shit together, because endings and closures are taking place whether you like them or not. But like Mercury is basically conjunct the sun and the moon under this particular new moon activation. That's huge. We have a lot of beautiful trines, grand trines, kites forming. I did talk about this in November's aspect overview. If you haven't taken a listen to that particular astro class, I would definitely recommend you do so. There's some beautiful aspects taking place under this new moon, but it is hella transformative. And although that sounds lovely, transformation hurts. It is not fun. It is not easy. Again, I want to remind you, this week specifically, we are waiting for this new moon to take place, because this week, the pile of ash that essentially was the old version of the phoenix, that is sitting there, that is smoking, that is smoldering, and the phoenix is getting prepared to rise up and to live again, to resurrect itself into a more powerful being, a more enlightened being, where it has a bigger, broader perspective because it's able to fly higher, okay? So that change, that transformation is already very powerful. Let's talk about the caterpillar to the butterfly, right? We've been talking about this particular analogy throughout the course of Scorpio season, because there is no better analogy that I could come up with. But, you know, the caterpillar, it recognized that it wanted a new life, that it wanted a different perspective. It created this cocoon around itself. It literally liquefied itself into a puddle of goo, and then it started rebuilding the skeletal structure of a butterfly. It doesn't know that it's a butterfly. It just knows that there's an immense change happening. And, you know, to kind of liquefy yourself, I'm sure that's a painful process. And to rebuild the skeletal structure, I'm sure that's a painful process. If you've ever had a broken bone of any kind, I'm sure you know how that healing process goes. It's no walk in the park. And now we're at the particular point where the butterfly is fully formed, but now it has to kind of bust out of its cocoon. And that is no easy feat. Okay, it's going to take a couple of days in order for the phoenix to basically materialize, for it to rise. And it's going to take a couple of days for that butterfly to actually kick down that cocoon and free itself. And the phoenix will rise and the butterfly will be freed under that new moon in Scorpio. So we're definitely going to be going through it here this week, because this is a major change, a major transformation. This is the death, ending, and closure. This is the renewal, the resurrection that we've been waiting for. And it is very intense and it is very life altering. And although there are some beautiful aspects to support this change and transformation, again, growing pains hurt. Now, not only like 24 hours later, we're going to shift into Sagittarius season, but of course that means that the moon and the sun, they're going to be hitting that 29th degree of Scorpio energy, and that is no joke. And even more than that, we're going to be in a direct opposition to Uranus, who is now retrograde at the 29th critical crisis degree of Taurus energy. And that is going to be a download of information, of enlightenment, of awareness that is going to basically crack open the holding patterns in our bodies, in our mental plane, in our emotions, in our memories. Our central nervous system is going to be jacked up, probably on the verge of feeling like it's going to be absolutely fried, because that's a lot of energy and insight to actually bring in to kind of help this change and transformation essentially break free of the holding patterns or the state of being that we have been, for us to transition into this new form, into this new version of self. And that all takes place before the sun shifts into Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius energy and Sagittarius season is the light at the end of the dark tunnel that Scorpio season is as well. But here's the thing. The minute that we step into that Sagittarius energy, time accelerates. Pressure intensifies. Why? Because we are in the last leg, if you will, as we are moving towards the winter solstice, which pops off December 21st when the sun moves into Capricorn. So anytime that we're moving into the season that kind of predates these activators like equinox and solstice axis, we feel that pressure. It's time to hurry up. It's time to get your shit together. It's time to kind of put the pieces together. It's time to get a vision. It's time to do the work. And there is a pressurized system that naturally takes over with the Sagittarius energy anyways. First of all, Jupiter rules over Sagittarius energy, and he is the great magnifier. He turns the volume all the way up, intensifies everything that we're thinking and feeling. He is retrograde in Cancer energy, which I think is going to give this Sagittarius season a little bit of a different vibe. However, Sag energy is very unfocused. It's very scattered. It's very ADHD squirrel brain, and we're restless and we want to do everything, but we end up really doing nothing because we're just spinning our tires and we're not really going anywhere. And all we do when we spin our tires is just create smoke, and we can't see through the smoke, but yet we want to take action. We want to make moves. So we're making little tiny moves that of course are hopefully aligning us to a new path, a new quest, new truth, new adventure, but we're not really going to understand whether or not the steps that we're taking in blind faith is actually helping us, progress to the next stage of our lives, or whether we're just walking around in circles. And we won't know that until the smoke clears. That Sagittarius energy is very manic, especially coming out of the emotional deflation that we will be going through prior to this new moon, through this new moon. And then we're going to get like this jolt of energy, this adrenaline rush coming at us with that Sag energy. And it is going to be from one extreme to the next. And of course, Scorpio season is about extremes, and we are definitely going to feel those extremes be magnified here this week. So just to set the tone, we start the week off with the moon in Libra, which, I'm not going to say is never fun, but there's a lot of teeter-tottering back and forth and up and down and all over the place. There's a lot of indecision. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're trying to stay in the shallow end, and that's impossible to do because we're in the depths of the darkness of Scorpio season here. We are on the brink of not only a death, but a rebirth. And, you got the moon in Libra over here trying to ignore all that by singing a beautiful rendition of Kumbaya, right? So we have that. We shift into Scorpio. Now, let me just also say that on Monday, November 17th, the moon is going to be transitioning from Libra energy to Scorpio energy, but we have a whole day where the moon is void of course. And that's kind of where our energy gets depleted, where we reach that emotional fatigue, where the death ending and closure is being felt. And we sit in that particular murkiness, I would say, until the moon shifts into that Scorpio energy. And then we are intensity all around. There's this pressurized system of recognizing that, again, that pile of ash is starting to smoke and smolder because the phoenix is getting prepared to materialize and rise again. And equally, there is this like defeat and deflation of energy because, again, the butterfly is in there struggling for its life, trying to break free of this cocoon, doesn't know what awaits it on the other side. It just knows that if it stays in there, it's going to suffocate. It's going to die in the cocoon. So it's trying to bust out. So here we are kind of emotionally exhausted, but we're still having to dig deep in order to kind of fight our way out of these particular restrictions, constraints, these particular aspects of the old world that essentially is coming to a death ending and closure point here this week. So once we enter into that moon in Scorpio energy, of course, we are going to be building towards the new moon in Scorpio, which just gets darker and deeper and more shadow work comes out to play. And there is this like divide between, do we just want to kind of curl up and let the death process happen and not worry about the resurrection and the renewal process altogether? But then there's another part of us that knows that we're only going through this death and destruction process in order to evolve and to grow. And therefore we have to kind of muster up the courage, muster up the strength in order to continue onward, in order to actually bust out of that cocoon, in order to actually materialize out of that pile of ash. And of course, Mercury is going to retrograde back into the Scorpio energy at the exact same time as the moon shifts into Scorpio as we enter into this period of darkness. And that is where we become fixated and obsessed once again on particular narratives, on particular storylines, on looping thoughts and patterns and behaviors where the fear narrative gets very, very loud and strong, and it's going to be a very detrimental time to our mind, body, soul equation. Now, all of this is happening in order to further trigger and activate the shadow parts that are kind of creeping up to the surface because, again, the renewal, the resurrection is the new version of self. And we have to eliminate as much triggers, as many activations, as many shadow aspects that we can in order to lighten the load as this new version of self materializes, so that that doesn't become a part of the hard wiring program that essentially right now we're just trying to remove, we're trying to eliminate. And so it is going to be a very bumpy ride. And then, we sit in that Scorpio energy again. We have beautiful aspects popping off in that Scorpio energy. But at the same time, there are some triggers, some activations that are taking place because, of course, that's the name of the game here. We got to get triggered and activated. We have to fully let the darkness, let the monsters, let the demons come out to play in order to actually do something with them, which is about putting a death ending and closure to them, major change, major transformation into something empowering instead of something that is basically keeping us stuck, keeping us paralyzed. And I suppose the real feature here this week is, that new moon. And, Mercury conjunct the sun and the moon at the same time is a major kicker. Anytime that Mercury and the sun are coming together while Mercury is retrograde, that's called a kazemi or a chasmi, if depending on how you want to say it. Either way, it marks the halfway point of Mercury's retrograde, and that is essentially when Mercury and the sun blend their energies together, and that's when major revelations, major insight takes place. And under a new moon, you throw the moon in there, there's definitely going to be a high level of psychic energy, a high potency of intuitive insight coming in. There's definitely going to be more of a soul leadership than an ego leadership, and that is definitely going to jolt people as well. And immediately after we have that new moon pop off, of course, the sun is going to make its way into that 29th critical crisis karmic degree. We do have the moon moving into Sagittarius prior to the sun moving into Sagittarius. And of course, all of those lovely oppositions and squares and activations take place. And the real kicker is that the moon in Sagittarius kind of has us manic. It has us restless. It has ants in our pants. We're all over the freaking place. And then towards the end of the week, we're going to have the moon shift into Capricorn energy, which kind of anchors all of the change, all of the transformation that we're currently working our way throughout the course of the week. So we start off the week with this intensity of trying to, find peace and harmony and balance and emotionally recalibrate all of the changes and transformations that we've been going through. And then we move into the moon in Scorpio where, things get pretty dark. That dark phase of the moon is no joke. And that's when we start kind of excavating the darker parts of the shadow realm. That's the emotional excavation that we have to go through to unearth whatever it is that we've buried, whatever it is that's repressed, whatever, skeletons we have shoved essentially back into the closet. And then there's this emotional rebirth, this resurrection energy that comes with, of course, that new moon in Scorpio. And then we expand upon it. We try to pluck out the silver linings about it. We try to align with a brand new vision because of it when the moon shifts into Sagittarius. And then we move into Sagittarius season. We get the ants in our pants. We're all over the freaking place. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And then the moon shifts into Capricorn energy. We get grounded, we get anchored, but it does kind of feel like we hit a brick wall at the same time. That's when we have to kind of anchor in the change and the transformation that we're going to be going through. And when we start planning and strategizing what we're going to do with it and what we're going to do from here. So with all of that being said, it's going to be quite a week. And it is going to be very difficult at times and through particular aspects and parts of it. But essentially, it is very needed in order to trigger this change, this transformation that we have been actively working towards throughout not only this year, but the last 9 years, guys. Okay, so this is pretty special. This is pretty intense. This is definitely going to give us a run for our money. This is definitely going to test how much power and control we have over our energy field, how much power and control we have over our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, and our ability to have the appropriate level of awareness in order to kind of nip particular holding patterns in the bud and repetitive thoughts and obsessive fixations in the bud and actually change and transform it into something that's going to support us, empower us, help us move on and move forward. But again, adjustment periods are never fun. Growing pains, not fun. Change, transformation, not fun. Resurrecting ourselves from a dead ass state, not fun. And so this is why we've been doing the work. And we're going to continue to really push the boundaries of those particular practices and resources here this week. So, as you can imagine, with the level of intensity of the energies popping off here this week, it is definitely going to do a number on our energy, on our physical body, on our headspace, on our heart space, and, on our field. And that is definitely going to not be fun. But before I jump into what all of that is going to be, I just have a couple of things on my list that I would like to talk about. First of all, just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for this lovely chat here Friday evenings. I really do appreciate it. I want to thank all of you for the patience that you've had in me trying to kind of get this new website together. Now here, I'm probably going to put my foot in my mouth. I'm going to try not to, but here's the deal. My birthday is on the 18th. That is Tuesday. And my goal, I've been working my ass off. Hopefully, I am ready to not only launch my new website with all of the membership tiers in it, kind of creating new content, a little bit of a better option than my current Patreon setup. I hope, I pray that I can get my shit together and that I can launch that website on my birthday on the 18th. Now, that being said, I don't know if I'm tempting fate here, but I am attempting to do this while Mercury is retrograde. So I don't know if I'm cray-cray or if I'm just, again, tempting fate, but we're going to try. We're going to try to do it. But even more than that, every year for my birthday, I try to do something different. I try to give back. I try to, help in some kind of way. And so on my birthday, I will be offering some new specials for services, specifically new services coming at you here in 2026. Specials meaning discounts on them, very limited time that you're able to scoop up services at a discounted price. I also have some limited items that I'm going to be releasing as well. I've been working on a lot of things here in the backdrop. Hopefully I can pull it off. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But the way to kind of, stay in alignment with that, if you're not already subscribed to The Vibe, which is my, my newsletter, I would definitely recommend that you jump over to my website, that you sign up, because I'm going to be sending all of those notifications out through email and, of course, on my Patreon as well. And that being said, limited time offers, limited products, limited discounts, all of these fun limited things. It's going to start on my birthday, which is the 18th, and it is all going to be shut down and closed up when the sun shifts into Sagittarius on the 21st. So a very short window of time to take advantage of those particular discounts and limited items and all of the fun things. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, like I said, I hope that everything works out in my favor. I am trying really hard to make it work in my favor. I think that would be a really nice birthday gift from the universe to me, is just to let things work and let technology be on my side, but we're going to have to wait and see. So with that being said, again, if you aren't on my email list, I would definitely recommend that you get on it, because it's going to be a short window of time. I'm not extending it past Scorpio season. And so it is definitely something that I would jump on, that I would be a part of, that I would be looking at your email throughout the course of, let's say, late on the 17th, early into the 18th, because you're not going to want to miss it. So with all of that being said, just a reminder that if you are interested in booking a 2026 year ahead reading with me, you have from now until the 18th to book for that. I will be removing that service on the 18th, and that will no longer be available. I am starting to piece together some of those year ahead readings, and of course, they are going to be sent out during the month of December. And so for those of you that have already kind of snagged yourself a spot, we just got to get into December, and you are likely going to start seeing all of those notifications in your inbox that, you know what, information is on the way and your reading is on the way as well. We have a lot to unpack for 2026. I have a lot to talk about, a lot to sort through, a lot of guidance, a lot of navigation that we are going to be doing in order to map out 2026 so that we can stay ahead of the game. So with all of that being said, let's dive into the Ascension symptoms that we can expect to pop off here this week. So I feel like, I had a big star written down about talking about the analogy about the butterfly and the phoenix. And I hope that I've already kind of did that in its fullest. I hope that it has made a little bit more sense to understand that, we're coming into the week. The butterfly is just starting to realize that, guess what? He's suffocating in there. He's going to have to start busting out of the cocoon here soon, eating his way out, so to speak. We, at the beginning of this week, are just a pile of ash. The pile of ash, of course, is the disintegration of who it is that we've had to be, and all of the aspects, the relationship dynamics, all of the things that we built and created out of that version of self has essentially been disintegrated into the pile of ash. And again, it's just a pile of ash coming into the week. It's not going to take very long, though, literally on Monday, before that pile of ash kind of starts smoking and smoldering again in preparation for the phoenix to be materializing. And again, his resurrection, his renewal will be full stop at the same time as the butterfly actually escaping from the cocoon under that new moon in Scorpio. So, of course, that means we're going to be moving into a new lunar cycle. And right now, we're still very much under the influence of the new moon in Libra that, of course, will be coming to a close. Having this particular lunar cycle kind of pop off with all of these very intense positive aspects supporting this change and transformation is going to make for a very, very interesting month ahead. Just because, again, where all of these new moons are taking place at the later degrees, the 28th degree of the sign, means that we are essentially anchoring in a lunar cycle that is going to be comprised of a different mutability when it comes to, or should I say modality, when it comes to all of the lunar phases. So, what do I mean by that? Okay, well, Scorpio is a fixed water sign. And so we are going to be anchoring in new seeds of intention, new beginning points under a fixed water sign. But, technically speaking, we're moving into Sagittarius season, which is a mutable season. We are going to be having a full moon in Gemini. So that is a mutable energy as well. That first quarter moon in between the new moon in Scorpio and that full moon in Gemini is going to be in Pisces. So that's a mutable sign as well. And, the last quarter moon that we are going to be having December 11th is going to be in Virgo energy. So those are all mutable signs. And basically, what we're used to is having a new moon in whatever sign and whatever modality that it's anchored in. And then the moon phases that follow that are in the same modality. And it's only as of recently that we started having these new moons at the absolute ending point of the season. Again, that's why we get these new moons at a 28 degree, that we are anchoring in under one modality. And then we have all of the other lunar phases that follow under a complete different modality. And I just think that's interesting because, mutability is what we're going to be moving into with Sagittarius season and all of those particular lunar phases. Mutability means that we need to be flexible. We need to adapt. We need to change. And the interesting part about that is that the fixed energy that we're having the new moon in Scorpio kind of be anchored into for this next lunar cycle for manifesting and shadow work is in a fixed sign. And fixed signs don't like change. They don't like to adapt. And it's like desperately kind of holding on to whatever is safe and secure and whatever makes us feel stable. But yet you have all of these other activations forcing change and transformation. And yes, change and transformation is what Scorpio energy is supposed to be about, but we resist it at all costs. That's why people don't like Scorpio energy, because we're going through a change and a transformation that we don't particularly want to go through. But we have to go through it nonetheless. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, just kind of laying out, the lunar cycle ahead. I, for one, think that it's going to be a little bit better of a lunar cycle just because the one that we're currently in, that was based off of that new moon in Libra, we've been torn, we've been divided. We've been flip-flopping back and forth, undecisive. That's the name of the game with the Libra energy. And our relationship dynamics have been all over the place. And even though we anchored the new moon in Libra in, which is a cardinal air sign, we had all of the fixed signs take place in the lunar phases that, came after it. And so, the teeter-tottering of knowing that we have to initiate a change, and then those fixed signs trying to double down on where it is that we would prefer to keep things the same, knowing damn well that we've been praying for change but not doing anything to help it out. This is why the intensity of the new moon in Scorpio is going to hit us tenfold, because this is the breakthrough point. This is the, death, endings, and closures in order for that rebirth, that resurrection to actually take place. And that is no joke. So when we're talking about how the energy is going to show up in the physical body here this week, I have a huge list to talk about. I'm going to try to stay as organized as possible. What I think we have to keep most in mind is just how the energy is kind of unfolding, meaning, there is a season and a cycle to it. Like I said, we're beginning the week with the moon in Libra, and that in itself has us kind of, again, desperately holding on to the shallow end, even though the water, the force of the water, the tide, if you will, is trying to suck us out into the ocean where there's a little bit more depth, a little bit more to kind of, sort through and swim through, so to speak. But the beginning of the week just feels a little bit, I'm going to call it not authentic. Reason being, the Libra energy, typically speaking, wants to kind of hide behind a happy-go-lucky mask, even though we're dying inside. And we're literally dying in our soul and our spirit, because that's what Scorpio season does to us, is it defrags the older parts in order for us to rise up and rise again, like the phoenix does, in order to be the more enlightened, more empowered self. But it feels like the beginning of the week, we're teeter-tottering, we're tug-of-warring, we're trying to avoid the dark parts, we're trying to keep the mask on, we're being kind of triggered and activated, but trying to play it off like nothing's going on, like nothing's happening. There is this want, need, and desire to kind of speak up and speak out about particular truths that we've been kind of harboring in our heart space, because Lord Jesus knows the heart activations have been intense, but yet we can't seem to get the words out, or we don't want to get those words out. And then, you have Mars and Chiron kind of popping off, triggering and activating us that much deeper in order to drop the mask, so to speak. And then it's almost as if the mask gets knocked off of our face unwillingly, and we're like just, surprised. We're trying to cover ourselves. You have to keep in mind, Scorpio is all about privacy and kind of doing things behind the curtain, so to speak. We don't want to be front and center. And so where the Libra energy is a little bit like attention seeking, the Scorpio energy wants to withdraw and just kind of, live life behind the scenes, if you will. And that withdraw, specifically when the moon shifts into Scorpio energy, is going to be pulling at us to kind of disconnect with the people, with the world around us. We talked last week about how we're reaching a breaking point where you're just done. You're done with certain ways of thinking, or certain ways of feeling, or certain ways of doing, or certain people, or certain aspects of your life. And that being done is just kind of overwhelming and semi-paralyzing at the same time. And we're definitely reaching that particular intensity point here this week, which is just going to kind of further exasperate where it is that we want to pull even further away from the interactions with the people, with the world around us. And that can get pretty dark. And I would say when Mercury shifts back into the Scorpio energy and we become, again, fixated on things that hurt, or things that we can't change, or things that are kind of ticking us off, or things that we need to let go of, there's a looping pattern that takes place in the mental plane. And we become so obsessed and so fixated on a particular thought or on a particular storyline or narrative that we can't stop thinking about it. We become obsessed and fixated on it. And that is going to create a lightheadedness, a dizziness, if you will. And with the overlaying, let's call it, with Mercury and Uranus popping off, that's a lot of energy that is going to affect the crown. We're bringing a lot of energy in. It's getting kind of kerfuffled in there. We don't know what to do with it. It is going to feel like our heads could possibly explode. But even more than that, there's a tingling, there's a buzzing, there's a zapping going on in our headspace. There is going to be that ear ringing, but it's going to be piercing, like painfully piercing, like almost disabling at times, where there's just this high level of frequency that comes into our audio field that we can't even process. It literally hurts. And so there is this mental overstimulated sense of being, but it's almost like creating a sense of confusion. It's because we're rapidly processing so many different perspectives and so many different memories and so many different ideas and so many different narratives at once. We think that we're thinking about a million things at once, but we can't focus on one of them. It's almost like everything's wrong, but there's nothing really wrong. And it's really doing a number on our head. And because we are in the particular situation where, again, mental health is really a huge factor for a lot of people, again, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of storylines here this week of a lot of people choosing to end this particular experience and or reaching a particular breaking point with their mental health, that there are just, very hurtful type of stories that, are going to get more and more repetitive as the years kind of unfold here, because again, we've been kind of backed into a corner with this mind altering state of living, the internet, AI, mental health issues, spiritual, religious psychosis, all of these things are doing a number on the headspace. It feels as if the forehead, specifically third eye area, is pulsating. There's like a vibration coming into the crown, but there's like this forehead pulsation, or it may actually manifest as feeling like you're having a sinus infection, or there's just like severe sinus congestion. It should feel like it's tingling. If it feels like it's a blockage or there's congestion there, you have a serious energy blockage in your third eye that you do have to work on trying to break through and remove. If you are feeling the tingling sensation, that's actually a good sign. It means that the energy is moving through it and your third eye is upgrading. If you're having like severe headaches or severe pressure or like head congestion because of it, that is highly significant of a severe blockage there that the energy can't seem to break through. And of course, that means that you're going to have to do some very deep shadow work in order to unearth why it is that you have this blockage up, why it is that you are essentially veiling that part of your third eye and not wanting to see the unseen. There's a lot to unpack if you're experiencing the painful part of these ascension symptoms at this particular point in the calendar. The tingling sensation, I think, is going to be a full body expedition, but it's going to be taking place in different areas of the body at different times of the week. And I think that specifically midweek, to the end of the week, there's going to be more electrical surges or electrical zaps taking place, more so in our limbs. So at the beginning of the week, I think it's more in our headspace, like from our shoulders up. Midweek to the end of the week, I think it starts kind of getting lower in the body, specifically with the limbs. And so we want to pay attention to not only the side of the body that is receiving most of those zaps, but the area of the body as well that can be very revealing. But basically, what we're going through here is a rewiring of the central nervous system, a rewiring of our programming, of our neural pathways, of the meridian channels in our physical body to be able to basically house a higher vibration and frequency than what it is that we've been used to. Now, not that I want to talk about the events of this past week with the, geometric storms and the quote unquote aurora borealis, the northern lights popping off in different areas of the world that it should never be, let alone a different color that is a very scary indicator of what is to come. I don't really want to get into it because people don't really understand what's going on, and this is not the platform for me to explain that. That's why I'm building my website. That's why I hope that I'm able to launch it here very shortly so that I can actually start talking about some of these things that I couldn't possibly dare talk about here on an open platform such as YouTube. And as I learned the hard way over this past month, I really shouldn't have been talking about some of the things that I talked about on my Patreon either. And I really don't think that I talk about a lot of, serious topics and themes to the extent in comparison of how other people that I view on social media are able to talk about things. But I thought Patreon was a safe place. I lost about close to 1,500 views, normal views, which to me is an unorganic number, which means that there is some sort of censorship going on over there as well, which is a big red flag to me. That's why I'm pulling out. What I'm getting at is that if you struggled over the course of this past week with the elevated energy coming into the cosmos, then you have to buckle down and you have some serious work to do, which means that you need to be strengthening your central nervous system. You need to be strengthening your energetic fields. If you were down and out and could barely move and felt more of the aches and pains than anything else, that's a problematic situation. It means that the energy is not flowing through your meridian channels in the way that it needs to be. Now, that's not to say, oh, you should be feeling great, because I myself had so much anxiety that it woke me up out of a dead sleep, couldn't even breathe, let alone actually function in a way that felt comfortable. But I also know that there are resources and there are tools to be leaning into when the energy gets to be so much. And even though when you put those into practices and it doesn't seem to take the edge off in the way that it used to, it is still trying to help rewire your central nervous system in a way that it hasn't been stabilized before. And whether you want to get into the nitty gritty of this is all quote unquote a spiritual energetic awakening versus just realizing that your body has endured enough trauma that it can't take it anymore, it's all the same shit. It's just two different ways of looking at it. One is material earth body based. The other is energetic spiritual body based. But we're talking about the same things here. And either way, doesn't matter the cause, doesn't matter your belief system of what is going on and what is actually transpiring in the physical body. It all comes down to the amount of electricity that you are able to house in your body without it paralyzing you and making you sick. And we need to really strengthen our central nervous system. We need to regulate that central nervous system. We need to strengthen our energetic field. We need to do protection work, because if you're still struggling to the point where you're disabled with some of these ascension symptoms, you really need to boss up, because you're not going to be able to withstand some of the things that are planned and some of the things that are naturally and organically going to be coming at us in the coming of years. Not trying to fearmonger, can't go into too much detail here, but these are very good indicators on the work that you still have left to do in order to protect yourself from the shitstorm that is coming your way, whether you like it or not. So talking about waves of energy, this week is definitely going to be a constant crashing of those energetic waves on our physical body. I would say that it is going to create not only temperature fluctuations, but it's going to come with a lot of static, a lot of electricity in the air. And so you may find that, your hair is standing on end because of the static electricity. You may find that you can't walk 2 steps without being zapped, that you can't, flick the lights on without being zapped. Maybe it is that, all of a sudden you're doing something and you're working your body, but yet you're freezing to death. And the minute that you sit down and you find yourself at a little bit of a peaceful moment where the body isn't as active, suddenly that's when the heat rushes in. Either way, I would say that the beginning of this week till that new moon pops off, there's going to be a fluctuation back and forth, and it's going to be very extreme because that's the way Scorpio energy works. I would say that after the new moon pops off, the moon shifts into Sagittarius, and then the next day the sun moves into Sagittarius. That's when we're going to feel the heat and feel the fire. Okay, just think of the phoenix having to resurrect itself from a pile of ash, materialize itself with so much electricity that it not only takes on a new form, but that it launches and catapults up in the air to a heightened level perspective that it's never been able to reach before because of the electrical charge that it can now house in its body. That is a lot of fire, okay? That's a lot of heat to house. And so while the beginning of the week, I think, is probably going to be the ebb and flow, the back and forth, the extremes of the energy and the static electricity and the temperature fluctuations moving through us, I would say towards the end of the week, post new moon, it's going to be straight stripping fire. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to get spicy. It's going to get hot and spicy in all kinds of different ways and all kinds of different manifestations of that. But energetically speaking, I think the field is going to be turned up a couple of notches, and that is definitely going to bring the heat to all areas of the body. Now, speaking of heat, this is also going to kind of overlay and correlate with the rage that is creeping up in the collective here this week. And therefore, if you're an energy worker or grid keeper, you're definitely going to have to transmute a whole hell of a lot amount of rage here this week. And adrenaline spikes, and that adrenaline just coursing through our bodies. Again, I don't think it's going to be so much rage and adrenaline at the beginning of the week. I would say that it's probably going to be one day prior to the new moon, on the new moon, and post new moon, that those particular rage and adrenaline spike activities are going to take over the body. But nonetheless, that does elevate the heart system. It elevates our heartbeat. So when we're talking about heart activations, there is going to be a very strange heartbeat pattern take over here this week. There is going to be an elevated blood pressure issue with the adrenaline spikes here this week as well. And it's very strange because at the beginning of this week, we are going to be so emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, energetically drained, specifically from this long ass void between the moon in Libra shifting into the moon in Scorpio here on the 17th, that it's almost as if, again, we're done. We have no life force energy. Again, the cocoon of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, the cocoon is kind of blocking out and veiling us from the change and the transformation going on. The caterpillar is no more. The goop that the caterpillar turned into is no more. The butterfly is fully formed, but that's exhausting. And now we realize that, guess what? I'm exhausting because I just built myself a brand new skeletal structure, and I have no more energy left in me. But if I don't find some energy, I'm going to die in here. We have to fight our way out of this. The flip-floppiness, the extremes of being emotionally drained to then all of a sudden manic on the inside, I think our inner realm is definitely going to be more wired than our physical bodies are going to be. I feel like we're going to feel mentally and physically fried, but emotionally highly charged. And that's a very, hard balance. I don't think there is no balance coming at us here this week. But that's a very hard thing to kind of manage. When we are feeling energetically and emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically drained, there's a heaviness, a weight. And we recognize that our central nervous system is fried. We can't do no more. We can't take no more. But yet we have to continue onward. And this is really where you learn how much strength you have, how much perseverance you have. These tough parts, I know everybody wants to whine and cry about them, but you're a warrior. Warriors don't cry at the battle in which they have signed up for. And I know that sounds harsh, and I know some people don't really enjoy my tough love lesson type of, mentorship, but I don't really care. We're not really at the point where I can be concerned about sugarcoating the information to protect your feelings, because if you are that raw and vulnerable, and if you are that sensitive at this particular juncture, I very much fear for you over the next couple of years. And I don't say that lightly. I say that with a lot of caution because, again, not trying to fearmonger, but we've been in boot camp for years. Okay, many people I know just started this journey in 2020 with the Great Awakening, and I do empathize that y'all didn't have as much time as some of us seasoned workers did. But at the same time, the tough times in life, the tough parts in life, that really reveals your true identity and what it is that you're absolutely made of. And if you're made of whining and crying, you may as well just sit this one out. Just kind of throw yourself into a delusional little bubble where everything is peachy keen and fine, because we don't need any warriors on the battlefield whining and crying that they signed up for a battle that they don't want to fight anymore. This is not the time and the place for that. And so I'm really, I empathize, but at the same time, I would really like to see a lot of people remove themselves off of the board, sit on the bench, watch if you need to watch. If you don't know how to alchemize your energy now, if you don't know how to channel that energy, if you don't know how to take on the collective's energy and actually turn it into something that the collective can use, then maybe you need to sit this one out, and maybe you need to do more work, and maybe you have to learn a little bit more, and maybe you have to practice a little bit more. The most dangerous thing is putting an amateur warrior on a battlefield ready to go up against, warriors that have been doing this their whole freaking lives. You don't stand a chance. And, we're at a very pivotal point, specifically where we're wrapping up this not only year of 9, but this 9-year chapter in preparation to moving into the new world here next year. And, the new world, I don't know if you ever witnessed anybody either given birth, maybe you've given birth yourself or witnessed somebody else giving birth, but there ain't nothing graceful and cutesy about it, right? There's blood, there's guts, there's screaming, there's intensity, there's pain, there's trauma. there's nothing beautiful about it. But the beautiful part comes later. The beautiful part comes after, everything kind of simmers down. And we do have some beautiful parts of life ready to be delivered to us, but right now you got to fight for it. And we are literally out here fighting for our lives on so many different levels of that particular saying. And so I don't mean to, diminish and discourage, but at the same time, if you have never, if somebody gives you a weapon and you've never used that weapon before and you have no training on it, you essentially could not only hurt other people that you're not supposed to hurt, but you could hurt yourself. And so when it comes down to understanding that you yourself, your intelligence, your awareness, your consciousness, your energy, your intention is a weapon, and you're not out here practicing every day, and you're not out here, reading the instruction manual on how to handle the weaponry with responsibility and with precision and care, then you need to go back to school. You need to sit this one out. The heart activations are going to continue here this week, but, last week they were a little bit jittery, like something, 5,000 pound elephant was sitting on your chest. I don't even know how much elephants weigh, but that seemed like a pretty good number to spit out there. It was really hard to breathe. It was hard to, kind of process a lot of those emotions, a lot of congestion, got kind of coughed up, spewed up, spat out, because we're breaking up old emotional blockages, old memories specifically. And I think that the heart activations here this week are going to continue, but they're going to be a lot more intense. And I think it's going to be intense because people are going to start holding their breath. Let me just remind you that your brain needs oxygen in order to think and strategize and get you out of problematic situations. And I know that it's a natural thing that when we are gearing up for impact, or we're afraid that we are coming to a breaking point, or we're about to quote unquote lose or die or let go or end, whatever, whichever way you want to kind of frame what Scorpio season is bringing to an end for you, we hold our breath. And that is not a good thing. It's an automatic thing that we do. But again, breath work is the only power and control that we actually have in this world. And I know that sounds dramatic, but if you don't have control over your breath, if you're a shallow breather, you're putting yourself in a survival state of anxiety every single day. So when things get emotionally intense and you're found in a situation, in a circumstance where things are intense and your body is in active adrenaline processing because you are facing a quote unquote survival ending, rebirthing situation, you need to be able to breathe, and you need to be able to breathe through it. And, again, referencing the shit show of the energy over this past week, if you had a hard time with that and you don't have a breathing practice, again, sit on the bench, learn those skills before you want to enter into the battlefield. Because when you have enemies coming at you, quote unquote, enemies coming at you, yielding their weapons, ready to cut through you and cut you up into tiny little pieces, the last thing that you need to do, A, is to hold your breath, because you're going to pass out long before they even get to take a swipe. And B, you need to be able to breathe through it so that you can remain calm and your brain can remain in a functioning manner. And I think that's where many people kind of, screw themselves over, is they hold their breath and they close their eyes and they brace for impact. And how the hell can you be in power and control with your eyes closed, without any oxygen getting to your brain, and just standing in the same spot that the enemy is trying to come at you in? Now, when I talk about enemies, I don't want to get you in a paranoid state, but if you don't realize that we're in a spiritual war by now, then I don't know that there's a whole lot that can be done at this particular point in order to open your eyes to that. Another indicator that if you don't realize that, maybe again, there is a nice little seat on the bench that you could be warming up until you kind of observe what's going on, until you practice, until you inform yourself on how to best handle yourself in this particular situation and circumstance. Now, the battle cry that many of us need to be doing is going to be kind of repressed here this week. There is a huge amount of throat tightening going on. Mercury is retrograde, specifically moving from one verbal vomit, Sagittarius, blurt it out, think about the consequences later sign, to a very introverted, keep things private, bite your tongue until it's absolutely necessary to pull the trigger and ruin somebody's life type of vibe in Scorpio. And so that throat tightness is definitely going to kind of hinder the breathing process. Again, another reason why you want to lean into those particular practices. But we're holding a lot in. We are holding a lot very tightly towards our chest space. We're not really willing to play those particular cards yet. Unfortunately, for most people, you're not going to have a choice. Those cards are going to be forced into play here with this Uranus opposition taking place here this week. Although you might not be sure on what to say or how to say it or how to present it, again, that's the moon in Libra, just trying to teeter-totter and procrastination. There's going to be a direct, blurt it out, get it off your chest, let the cards fall in whichever way they need to fall type of vibe coming at us with this new moon. So we talked about anxiety, and again, anxiety is just unfocused energy. And if you don't believe me, the next time that you're having anxiety, first of all, if you go through the checklist of, okay, is there actually something on my mind or in my body creating this anxiety? And it's like, no, 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 no. And you're just feeling anxiety. It's because you're channeling energy in from the collective. And because it's unfocused and because there's no real purpose to it, you have to give it an intent. And when you can focus that energy and channel it in a way that is actually healthy for the body and healthy for the meridian channels to be able to, again, test and house the amount of electrical charge coming in from the cosmos that you're able to contain in your body without being paralyzed, this anxiety coming at us here this week is going to give you another chance and opportunity to kind of test those particular parameters. Give it a focus. You know, people are like, what does that even mean? Okay, so instead of sitting around having anxiety about hypothetical situations that will never unfold in the way that you are fantasizing that they will, why don't you engage the physical body in a productive activity? Why don't you recite a song? Why don't you think about something constructive instead of just allowing your mental plane to have power and control over you? If you do not have control over your thoughts at this point, you're going to be in for a tough time, specifically next year and in the coming of years. Once Uranus re-enters that Gemini energy and stays there for good for the next, 8 or 9 years, that is mind effery at its finest. And if you don't think that you're being influenced, if you don't think that you're being kind of mind effed now with the vibrations and the frequencies of the false grid that the beautiful, powerful people of this earth have built in order to basically have control over our minds, you really need to get your shit together. I cannot emphasize it enough. You have to be able to know whether or not the thoughts that you're having actually belong to you or not, because there is going to become a very, very potent space over the next couple of years where there is going to be such a high level of false electrical intensities that are created to manipulate your mind. Again, can't say too much. We'll be saying lots more once I get my freaking website built. And I say that because if you want to talk about, like your mental plane being overworked, I do not enjoy building websites and coding and making sure that this connects with that and everything goes in the same order. And I literally am so consumed with it that I'm dreaming about it at night with the 4 hours of sleep that I'm getting. It is all of, solutions and problematic situations that I face in the run of the day with that goddamn website. And I'm really looking forward for it to being done so that I can stop thinking about it. Anywho, I digress. The point of this conversation is that you cannot allow your mind to get the better part of you. You cannot allow your mind to dictate how your mood is going to go. You cannot just sit around in a state of anxiety with unfocused thoughts and just ride that out, okay? This is where we need to boss up, where you need to be doing the work, where you need to have power and control over your energy field, mind, body, and soul. Here this week, though, there's going to be a physical vibration. We already kind of talked about the electrical zaps taking place, but there is going to be like a vibration, like a hum from the inside out. And it's going to feel very weird. It doesn't hurt. It's not a painful thing. It's just going to be like where is that humming coming from? Is that my lungs wheezing? Is that like a bone grinding on something else? Is there a vibration out in the universe that is connecting to this? Again, our central nervous system is going through a rewiring. There is a vibration and frequency, an actual hum taking place from the inside out. And this, nervousness, this nervous system rewire does have a flip-flop feeling that will be taking place in our stomach and our digestive system as well. Our digestive system is always kind of in flux with all of these energy shifts anyways, but it's going to feel like you are, I think I've used this analogy before and it worked quite well. So remember when you were a kid, or maybe even do it now. I don't know. It's pretty dangerous when you're doing it as an adult because bumps and bruises are a lot more painful now than they were back then. But when you kind of balanced your chair on the two back legs and the feeling of it, almost tipping over, it's that feeling. It's the elevator flop feeling. It's the stomach flapping all over the place feeling. And it also feels not only like you're falling, not only like gravity is failing you, but it also in the back of your mind, you feel like you're forgetting something, and that is the reformatting of your memories. And again, Mercury and Jupiter both retrograde, one in Sag this week shifting into Scorpio, and Jupiter, of course, remaining in Cancer for the whole time. This is a reflection, a renewal, a rewiring, a restructuring, a reformatting of our heart and our head in the way that we remember certain events of the past. So, again, I talked about the rage, I talked about the adrenaline spikes and being triggered and activated specifically as we build towards that new moon, because that's where we have to kind of get that shadow work out in front center, do the work in order to change it into something powerful. But the triggers and activations are going to be hella intense. And with that, there's a restlessness coursing through our body, the vibrations, the frequencies, the nervousness, everything else. Once we get post new moon and the moon shifts into Sagittarius, and then the next day we actually move into Sagittarius season, I would expect there to be restless leg syndrome taking over. Typically speaking, Sagittarius energy rules over the thigh. And there's going to be like quivers and Charlie horses and tremors and that vibration, those zaps in our lower extremities anyways. And then towards the end of the week, specifically when the moon in Sag moves into the Capricorn energy, we're going to feel it in our lower extremities. So knees popping, ankles twisting, tension and rigidity in the lower extremities, because we're holding fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the steps that we need to take into the unknown. And again, just consider the fact that the butterfly is never used as wings. Takes a little bit of muscle memory in order to practice and flex and do that without it being like a intentional type of focus. And that is very much, us coming out of that new moon. We are a new version of self. There is a new structure to our central nervous system. There is a depth and complexity in our soul and in our spirit that we're able to access that we haven't been able to access before. And, it's going to be like the first day with our new feet type of thing. So definitely be cautious and aware of your footing. Be a little bit slower, I would say, which is going to be an oxymoronic thing to actually be able to do, seeing as the ants in our pants with Sagittarius season is just going to have us ripping and roaring and spinning wheels and spinning tires with nowhere's really to go. I don't think I would really have to put this on my list because I think that everything that I've covered thus far would be highly suggestive of this. But let me just say it for those that need it, short, clean cut and clear. This week is an emotional roller coaster. This week is an emotional roller coaster that may consist of outbursts of rage, of anger, outbursts of crying, just, blubbering, ugly faced mess. Emotional roller coaster of being so highly irritable that you want to off someone or someone else. Well, yourself. Let's start with ourselves because that's where really the scorpionic energy is focused most. You have to become so sick and tired of your own shit. That's when real change and transformation actually takes place. And you may feel irritable and agitated and activated and triggered by someone else, but realistically, everyone outside of you is just mirroring back parts of yourself that you haven't faced yet. So, you got to understand that even though you want to point the finger and blame someone else for triggering and activating you, if you didn't have the open wound still left within yourself, if you failed to heal that part, whose fault is it that you're getting triggered and activated? Because it sure as hell isn't anybody else's problem other than yours. So we're going to be facing a lot of the shadows on this emotional roller coaster. And even though I kind of already talked about the stomach flip-flopping and the digestive dysfunction, may I also just say that there's a high probability that you may actually puke. Okay? You may actually puke. The emotional intensity may become so freaking overwhelming that your emotions literally make you puke. Or it could go the other way, because Scorpio energy is all about extremes, that you're holding on so freaking tightly to whatever it is that's sloshing around inside you that you end up constipated and you're literally holding on to the shit mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and disgustingly so. Either way, we are being illuminated to a brand new truth of the matter here this week. And sometimes that truth is hard to digest. Makes you stomach sick, makes you literally, physically, energetically want to puke. And between the fatigue, the absolute, exhaustion, and then the immediate follow-up of adrenaline spikes, that is a roller coaster all in itself. And, with our energy all over the place, with no real stability here this week, we are definitely going to feel the highs, the lows, the everything in between coming out one end or the other. So again, the inner realm is going to feel fried. The outer realm is going to, the inner realm, even though we're feeling fried, it still is kind of wired, like a little bit buzzy, a little bit manic. The physical body, though, is probably more tired than wired. We're just having a hard time finding that extra physical energy to bust out of that cocoon or to materialize ourselves as that beautiful phoenix. And of course, the last thing that I want to mention here on my list is that the dream state, first of all, the dream state is going to get hella vivid. You are going to have colors appear in your dream state that you've never seen with your eyeballs here in this earth plane. You are going to hear sounds, specifically music or song, in your sleep state that is the most beautiful thing that you've ever heard, that you've never heard on this earth plane before. You are going to feel things in your dream state that are going to kind of carry over into your waking state and can be a little bit disorienting and paralyzing when you first wake up. Now, that is just because a change and transformation happens on all different levels, and there's only so much work that we can do when we're awake. And there's only so much memories, or repressed memories, I should say, that we are willing to voluntarily open and reprocess in our waking state. And so, there is going to be a peak take place in our dream state here this week. And I'm going to say most of us are going to be very deep in sleep. Can't wait for that. I hope I get more than 4 hours. But there is, towards the end of the week, when that Sag energy starts to kick in, a high probability that insomnia is going to be kicking in because we got ants in our pants. The restless legs, of course, isn't going to help anything. The manicness isn't going to help anything. It's hard to sleep when you have adrenaline coursing through your body. When your central nervous system is fried, it won't fall asleep. It won't, simmer. And so, again, we start off this week with one set of symptoms and complaints. We end off with a totally very extreme, different list of symptoms and complaints. But nonetheless, we are basically on the bridge, ready to walk through this beautiful threshold into a brand new chapter that requires us to be a different version of self. But the doorway is pretty scary looking, and it is going to be a challenge to get through that doorway. But man, are we ever going to be grateful that we pushed ourselves through that particular doorway once this week is over. So guys, again, I want to thank you so much for showing up, not just for me, but for yourself. Secondary to that, I hope that you navigate this week's intensities with as much power, as much grace as you can muster up within yourself. This is going to be a major pivot point here this week. I cannot wait for it. It is going to get darker before it gets lighter. But again, it's always the darkest just before the dawn. There is a major breakdown, major breakthrough, and we are going to be better off for it. So I continue to cheer you on. I thank you so much for tuning in. I send you so much love, and we'll talk to you soon.